Hello everybody. This is part 3 regarding the Electoral College. Now, the information that I've received, I've put below in the description box. I linked it on the first video. It's a very real thing that's happening. 14 states have already agreed to hand their electoral votes over to whoever wins the popular vote. In total, that's 189 electoral votes. If you add Ohio, which is on the table right now, that will be 207 electoral votes handed over to the candidate who gets the popular vote. Why do we all know? We all know this, that the Democrat from now on will be winning the popular vote because California has 55 electoral votes. New York has 29. California will always go for the Democrat because the border is open and that illegal immigrants have always been able to vote in California. I lived in California for a time. What they do is they bus them from pole to pole and they give them a list of people. Go in, say this name, go vote. You can register if you are illegal in California because the voter registration form goes like this. Do you have an ID? If you do, you write first page. No ID. Second page. Do you have a utility bill? No. Go to the next page. Next page after that. Do you have a library card? No. Next page after that. Do you have an address? Give the address of your local post office. That's it. You can vote in California. And it was November, I think it was 2 years ago now at this point. It'll be 2 years this November. A judge in California said that if you have a license, you can vote. You are automatically enrolled in California to vote, even though you are not a citizen. It's done. People come over the border and they get 100% on the dole, work under the table. As of 4 or 5, possibly 6 years ago, the total amount of money being sent out of this country back to their homes was $120 billion. They had $120 billion extra. Do we have, can we pull together and have $120 billion extra that we can send to our relatives overseas? No, we don't. That means they're getting paid an awful lot of money. The reason why the border's been open and every single president that we've ever had has said that we've had to close the border. We only want the people who want to come to America, and every single president has said this, who wants to be an American, who wants to work hard. We don't want criminals coming to America. We want people that will assimilate and become Americans. They all talked about the closed border, but the Republicans let it go too. Why? Democrats want the votes, the Republicans want the cheap labor. They want a permanent serf class. You have a permanent serf class. Why do the big companies and the very rich people want a permanent serf class? Is because you don't have to pay. It lowers the wages. You don't have to have that high minimum wage. You depress the wages because you have people coming in constantly that will work for low wages. And you don't have to pay workers' comp or unemployment insurance because they're all under the table. That's why these wealthy people want this. You can pay them a quarter of the wage. The state, we do. The state, this is who it is. We pay, the taxpayers. Our taxes go up. And that pays for them 100% on the dole, their housing, their medical care, the schooling, the food, everything you can think of. And infrastructure. We need to build more, and who pays for that? The government? No, it's the taxpayers. It's our money. California is a sanctuary state. And 43% of the people living there are on the dole. 73% of those DACA kids, which was illegal. DACA was illegal. That was against the law. You weren't supposed to allow unaccompanied migrant children into this country, and they were not supposed to be allowed to stay in this country. They will tell you they're all valedictorians, they're going to be great Americans, but actually 73% of them are on the dole. Half of them can't read or write anything in their own language. There's only a very small percent. The rest of them pretty much can kind of pass speaking American, and a very small percent can speak American well. I assume that's the top, above the 73% that are actually on the dole. This is reality, people, okay? Now, I'm gonna read you something out of the article, and it's a trust, every news source that I go to is a trusted news source. I'm referred to it by somebody who has credentials, not just anybody who's spouting off their opinion, somebody who has credentials in the field, the expertise. And this is a very trusted news source, and I'll link the article below. I'll just read this short part of it. The popular vote movement is spreading like wildfire across the country. On Thursday, New Mexico became the 14th state to join the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, joining California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington State, and the District of Columbia. The states, which represent a whopping 189 electoral votes, have agreed to shift their voting allocations once the group amasses 270 votes, the threshold needed to decide a presidential election. If Ohio decides to join the compact, the state's 18 electoral votes would push that number to 207. A few large states or several small states could easily put them over the top. Now, New Mexico, I'll tell you something very quick about New Mexico. New Mexico used to be Republican. There's a senator there that never got voted out of office. He was actually a very good man. His name was Senator Pete Domenici. And I have a relative that worked for the Department of Justice and befriended his right-hand man, which she was a woman. Her name was Angie Raish. I'll even give you her name, Angie Raish, good friend of our family. She's over 100 years old now. And Angie, when she walked into a room in Washington, D.C., doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, everybody stopped and went over to her. She was so warm and wonderful. And could she cook? She was just amazing. And she always, Pete Domenici was just an adorable person. She had to keep a briefcase filled with socks and ties, because a lot of the times he would put the wrong socks on or mismatched socks, or he'd have the wrong tie on, and she would always fix him up. But she worked her way up from the top. She was like a country bumpkin. She is Italian by nationality, but she worked herself up to the top. You know, those are the days that you could work yourself up. You go to a business college, learn how to be a secretary, and then she went up and worked at the Department of Justice, and my relative worked for the Department of Justice with her. She was older than my relative, and my relative also met John F. Kennedy, and she said he had the most beautiful, piercing blue eyes. So I've heard lots of stories. In fact, I've heard lots of stories from both of the aisles, because, as I've told you before, I had a relative that marched with Martin Luther King, and he is gay, Italian, And his poster was put up all over the South. His poster with his name to be lynched, to actually be lynched. And in the South, if you're Southern Italian, you're half black. So it's that whole Jussie Smollett thing, but in real time, kind of like it was reality. What happened to my cousin? He's a Democrat. He went to work for Vista. He formed the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, and he used to be married to a man, and he was he was an alcoholic. He was very difficult to be with. But then again, my relative, the old Italian family, that's yelling all the time. They're also difficult to be with. But anyway, they held this party in their brownstone in Washington, D.C., except they painted it gray. It was just beautiful. He was married to an architect. He really did. We loved him, George. We loved him. He was so personable, so nice, but I guess he was a really nasty alcoholic. Hey, they were holding this big party, and guess who knocks on the door? See, I knew about Janet Reno long before anyone else suspected. Janet Reno, she was the Attorney General under Bill Clinton, and my cousin also was appointed by Bill Clinton as well, by the way. So I've got contacts on both sides of the aisle. Well, they were having a party, and the doorbell rings, and who's standing there? It's Janet Reno, and she's drunk as a skunk and just swaying there. And she is a lesbian. Well, actually, she's dead now, but she actually was a lesbian. People suspected that, but it's the truth. She was. And so she was going to a party where, at that time, being out wasn't the easiest thing to be at that time. So I understand how they suffered, because I have another family member who also is gay, very well educated, and they really know how to. I mean, they really are very smart in the ways of finance. I'll tell you that right now. But anyway, I've heard stories on both sides of the aisle. And as a profession, I was a paralegal. I worked for a general who was in military intelligence and working as an attorney at the same time. I received phone calls from the Pentagon and the White House. I had to be checked out completely. And I learned an awful lot, and I met an awful lot of people. So I know a lot about the law. I know a lot about how the military and all this stuff works. And I also befriended that general. Became friends with me, and he appreciated my intelligence for some reason. He said, you should be an attorney, the way you think, how you can deduce things. You really can, and you can really drive a point home and get to the mystery, solve the mystery. When Obama was running, I went up to him and I said, this is dangerous. This guy he won. And this is dangerous, all the things that he says he's going to do. Have you heard it? And he said to me, he can never do what he says he's going to do. And he didn't, and this guy was military intelligence. I mean, he's retired from military intelligence now, retired from the military now, but is still working as an attorney. According to the law, what Obama did was completely against the law. We didn't have the money to do everything he said we were going to do, or he was going to do. It was completely illegal. So according to the attorney he used to work for, he just brushed it off and said, no, he can never do that. Because legally, he's thinking in his head, nobody in Congress or the Senate is going to let him get away with doing this, because that is not what the law says. That isn't how it works. But Obama had a pen and a phone and said, if you don't do what I tell you to do, what I want you to do, I've got a pen and phone, I'm just going to do it anyway. So everybody, you see, this is why you've got a biracial president, because if you go against him, you can be called a racist. So if the president is gay, you could say, well, you're a homophobe. Or if the president is a woman, the Democrats put in a woman, oh, you're against women. You're a sexist. whatever it is, that's why they've got these candidates that if you go against their policy, they'll just call you a name. It's not about, that's a bad policy, or what they're doing is against the law. They will do it anyway. This can't possibly happen. This can't. Now, when did you ever dream that this country would embrace socialism? When did you think that that was going to happen? Never. Why would we embrace the state taking away our freedom of speech? It's taken away. People are deplatformed all the time for saying the wrong thing. It's not politically correct. That's communism. When did you think America was going to fall for that? That's never going to happen in America. Great opinion. Who would really want this? I mean, logically, that's true. Nobody would want this, but it happened. And our right, Second Amendment right, that's being taken away. That's all you hear about is when a shooting happens, it's not the person, it's the gun. When the largest mass shooting in history happened way back in the 1920s, and it was by a guy on the council. I have a video about the whole thing. It was on the school council, and he had tortured his own animals before he blew up the school. That's how he did it. He blew up the school. He made a bomb in the school, handmade bomb. And in the basement, he had barrels of fuel, kerosene, that were going to catch up. Just in case the bomb didn't go off above, it was going to go off in the basement. But he had burned his barn down, killed his animals, and killed his wife before he came and watched the schoolhouse burn down. That's an old video. I'll link it to the bottom if you want to. People don't want to watch this video. Obviously it's a miserable subject, but that was the largest school massacre in U.S. history, and it did not happen by gun. Just like the pressure cookers and the Boston bombers. Who would ever think that you need a background check to buy a pressure cooker? For God's sakes, these guys who've been over here for years and are living on the dole. So was his whole family, and they were asylum seekers. And Putin warned us. Putin called up Obama because he was friends with Obama and said, "These guys are trouble. They're going to blow up your country. They're trouble." And every 6 months, these asylum seekers, the Tsarnaev brothers, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, and then the other one is Speed Bump. The one he ran over his brother on the road. It's like a speed bump. Would go back over to the country that they left, and they were seeking asylum here, and they would stay there for months at a time, learning to be terrorists. Complete lie. When they came back into this country, first of all, we should never have let him out of there. Really? You came here to seek asylum. Why are you going back there? Once they came back, they'd say, well, you know what? Apparently, there's no issue with your country. We're going to revoke your asylum because it's bogus. Go back. But no, Obama did nothing. Those were pressure cookers. That's how, and what happened to the Ariana Grande concert, that was also a bomb. So the Democrats, whatever they want to abolish, the media, Hollywood, and the media, they work together with the politicians, and they focus on whatever it is they want removed. And if you want to bring in socialism, which is communism, you need to take the guns away. That's what Hitler did. He was a socialist. That is what all these socialist countries do. They take the guns away. So they focus on the fact that a gun was used in this massacre and how easy you can kill people with guns. But if you ask Joe Biden, he can't even shoot an AR-47. He said a shotgun is much easier to use. The other one's harder. So we should maybe outlaw the ones that are easier to use, possibly. So this is how our country, that you would never think who amongst all these crazy screaming Hillary supporters wearing the pussy hats and Antifa, screaming in the streets, beating up people in wheelchairs and elderly people, why would they want to abolish freedom of speech, their right to protest, to gather and protest and have free? Why would they want to abolish that when they're using it to push their platform? It doesn't make any sense. And you'd say to yourself, well, it's never going to happen because they clearly should know better that if you remove freedom of speech, you can't protest. You will be like a prisoner. Who wants to have the state take everything you own and tell you where to live, that you live in government housing, control what you do for a living, control every word that comes out of your mouth, whether there's enough deodorants on the shelf, whether there's enough food in the shops? The state controls the amount of food grown, the amount of animals slaughtered, the amount of food. That's why there's bread lines in those countries. And when you get to the end of the line, there's no more food. And if you're too sick to go to the store to get the food, you don't get any food because you're allotted a certain amount of food. Who wants to live under? That would never fly in America. But you know what? It's flying in America. We voted Obama into office. The general attorney I used to work for never thought by law this could happen by law. Law means nothing because Obama proved that you could run this country like a dictator and we would play possum and clap. And when he said that, they all applauded. You just deballed us. And we're not racist. You see that? We're not racist. Anything he says is great because he's half African. He's not half black. He's not a descendant of slaves. His father was probably one of the tribes that won the war and sold the other tribe as slaves, brought them to the coast. And that's how the transatlantic slave trade started, was that the winners would sell the losers as slaves. You see, the world, slaves were all over the world. People were buying and selling slaves all over the world, all different colors. It wasn't just black people. But there were so many wars going on in Africa that they decided, hey, why don't we sell the losers and we'll trade them for guns? Basically, that's what they wanted, guns, so they could have, oh, there's guns. See, guns are bad. See, it started the whole slave trade. Power, and they could fight more wars. And if they were more effective in fighting wars, then they could sell more slaves and get more money for selling slaves. Black people selling black people, people selling people to people. You know, that's what was going on. So because he was half African, had no experience, grew up in Hawaii where there's basically no racism in Hawaii. That's like the state. He didn't have the black experience, but nonetheless, see how we're not racist? We're letting him do whatever he wants to do, and we're happy about it. You just saw, when you saw that, you saw communism. That's how the Communist Party works. You think that this will never happen, well, it's already happening. They've already amassed enough. And Ohio is right on the table now. That's going to bring it up to 207. 207. California. Why does California take 3 months to count the votes? When you put the vote into the machine, it's counted immediately. Why? Do you want to know why it took 3 months? It's because they had to make sure that Trump realized that he was a loser. You got the electoral votes, but you really didn't win the popular votes. They took 3 months to make up as many votes as possible. That's why they did it. And if it's 1 million, that's about 3 million more, tells Trump puts the message out there, you really lost the election, didn't you? So if that's going to happen, and you've got a state as crazy as California, that's where Hollywood is, that's where the crazy people are, that's where the feces on the streets are, and there's over 200,000 people in the streets of Los Angeles because they're out of work, because there's so many people coming in who will work for a quarter of their wage and get 100% on the dole because the Democrats want it that way. That crazy state, which as far as I'm concerned, stick dynamite in the border, let it off, and let the whole just in the border, just in the border, and just push it off into the sea. Just push that state off into the sea, and we'd be much better off. This state, we will always go Democrat because it's gone. The people who are running it, it's gone. You can't fix it. So that will always produce 3 million more votes. If a Republican wins the Electoral College, they will make up as many votes as possible to show that president, whoever they are, that they really lost. This is the land of Hollywood, the land of make-believe, the land that actually created Obama. And everything he said was off of TOTUS. He read it. Remember when he was honoring Aretha Franklin, and the guy who was typing in on TOTUS the word respect, anybody who's lived in America, and of course he was alive when that song came out. They played it over and over, RESPECT, over and over again. She spells the word out, and they misspelled it. And then he said RSPCT. He completely misspelled it, even though he's talking about that song, and it should be singing in his head. He should be hearing that song in his head and her voice singing it. And since he's so intelligent, he should know how that word is spelled anyway, and should have noted when a word is misspelled. He should have said it correctly anyway, but he didn't, because he's so dependent on whatever TOTUS says. So he always sounds intelligent, and he sounded great during the campaign. He said everything what everybody wanted to hear. There's no Black America, there's no white America, there's no red America. We're all Americans and we're supposed to work together. But that was a bunch of baloney, because you were watching Hollywood. Hollywood put on a show, and the country followed. And the country was afraid of being called a racist. So the country let him get away with whatever he wanted to. And he abolished the Tea Party, which are Black people, including Herman Cain, who belonged to the Tea Party. They didn't do anything wrong. In fact, when they had a rally, they left the city cleaner than they found it. But he made them out as racist, but they weren't racist. And then he went after them and any conservative group, audited with the IRS, and Lois Lerner has never been charged. He's never been charged, but that was totally illegal to do, but he got away with it. You see, it doesn't matter whether it's illegal or not, or rationale says this can never happen, or there's a group of us that say this is wrong, we don't want this to happen. It is very easy to change the law. It is very, very easy, because they're not following the law. If you follow the law, then you must be a racist. That's the way, or a homophobe, or a sexist, or whatever name you want to call them. And then we follow. You have badgered us into submission. You have silenced our voice. You've made everything politically incorrect, so we're afraid to say anything. And the hatred and the vitriol and the violence that is going on in the streets, you would never think this was happening in America. Why would these people want communism? Why would they want to live on rations? Just because Marx said that it's a world of everyone should have leisure time. It was all about the destruction of the family. That's what communism brought, the destruction, the divorces, people unable to stay together, drugs, which hurt the brain. Your brain is still growing, and then you take the drugs and you're bathing it in a bath of toxic chemicals. It doesn't grow properly. And so therefore, things like latent schizophrenia and an inability to have an intimate relationship comes in. So therefore, you brought these drugs in and you've destroyed, of course they destroyed the Black community first, and then they destroyed the rest of us. And most marriages end in divorce. There's no family structure. There's no neighborhoods. People are no longer able to communicate effectively with each other. That's communism. Why would we have bought the destruction of our society? The thing that built civilization, when civilization started to progress forward is when we start families. Marriage is the thing that catapulted civilization forward. Before that, you had kids, and the kind of like the tribe raises the kids, and kind of all over the place. But when you had a cohesive family unit where the father took the responsibility to go out and get the kill, and the mother took care of the kids and whatever, and you had somebody that would show you right from wrong, and you could depend on to protect you and love you. That's what built civilization. And also the idea that every human being has value. Every human life has value. And that actually came into the Western world through Christianity. When Christianity had a larger, colonize the world much. Actually, no, Christianity didn't colonize. Christianity was converted by missionaries. 1,400 years ago, we had the mass fire, convert by fire and sword. The colonization, basically, the spread of Islam, took over. Most of the countries it took over were all Christian. They're all Christian countries first. And it was the family unit. Then you wonder why the Western world advanced very quickly versus the other. And the world that we know now as the Middle East is not as advanced. It's because of the rules. They live by Sharia. It's an oppressive regime. You live by fear. I don't want to get into it, but if you know anything about Sharia, it doesn't promote growth and expansion and thought. It's about fear. You know how women in those countries kind of live in a black body bag with slits for the eyes, and they cut off their genitals either when they're born or up to the age of 5 or 6 without anesthesia. And if the husband thinks they have an independent thought, they're banished to beds apart and beaten in submission, Surah 434. That doesn't help promote a civil, or you're caned, women are caned in public, people are stoned to death for adultery, all sorts of things. If you're homosexual, you're thrown off of buildings, you're stoned to death. It says in Surah 800 that a shower of rocks will be rained down upon them. Or beheaded or hung or something like that if you're homosexual. See, this kind of law doesn't help bring civilization forward and invite creativity and allow for men and women to think and grow and learn and be equal. See, Western civilization, with the advent of Christianity, valued human life. Was in Greece. They had slaves in Greece. Greece didn't have the idea of valuing human life either. And if you were a slave, there was one slave that became a citizen, and women were still half citizens. But with Christianity, women became equal to men. If you read anything about what Jesus said, and the witnesses that he picked, or basically that came to the tomb were all women. The witnesses were women. And before that in Judaism, women, just like in Islam, actually there's A lot of if you read the Talmud, there's a lot of similarities between the two religions. A lot of similarities. But you got to read the Talmud. There's two of them, the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmud. And there's like 26 books each, so it's a big thing to get into. But Christianity kind of changed that. And also Christianity built up the universities. That's where universities came from. They're originally Christian institutes of learning. So you wonder why civilization advanced. It's because of Christianity. But that's all tumbling down. For some reason, we're embracing communism, which is atheism, which takes away religion altogether. Even Islam, it takes everything away. And we're embracing this.